I'd like to welcome you all here to our fifth and final event in the Civic Engagement Institute this semester. So we're ending it very well with Dr. Harriet Cianci. Harriet graduated from Tufts actually in the Drug and Alcohol Recovery Counseling Program many years ago.
Many.
Years ago. But she took that knowledge and became a professor herself in that very same program 21 years ago. Before that, she was actually a drug and alcohol counselor for 20 years. She's got a wealth of experience that she's going to bring to the podium today. She'll be actually retiring after this semester. Many of you know that, but others may not. So she's leaving with a bang. And I think in some sense we've had a lot of conversations about the discussion she's going to have with you. She's going to bring it all full circle and bring her experience to her conversation with you on mental health. It's a very important issue. It seems to be becoming more important as the months and years go by, and something that the Civic Engagement Institute, I think, has embraced. So we like to bring these programs to you. So in any case, I've known Harriet for 16 years. That's how long I've been here, and she's an esteemed colleague, and I hope that you embrace what she has to say. She's going to offer an alternative point of view. She loves thinking outside of the box. That's one thing I know about Harriet, and she's going to offer a very interesting perspective on the state of mental health. So, Harriet Cianci.
Okay, well, I love Townsend Community College. It has a very special place in my heart, which is why I agreed to even do this. And I got the wrong notes. Because I'm pushing myself completely beyond my comfort zone. And because of that, I have notes that I have to stick to. And if you ask any one of my psychology students, they'll say, thank God, because I go off on tangents. And then we have to become like Hansel and Gretel and find our way back, which sometimes works and sometimes it doesn't. So, and my psychology students are very familiar with this picture of the iceberg, except they usually get to see my drawings, which I'm going to try to spare you of my artwork. So just a little bit of a disclaimer before I begin. While this presentation will discuss psychology and mental health, I'll present it to you through the complicated lens of postmodernism and the powerful impact it has had on every area of our culture, specifically in the context of spirituality. I'll also be showing you research studies because everybody loves research, right? Right. Okay, so I could probably talk about psychology and mental health for days, and I have the perfect job because I already do. I'm here for an hour or less, so I will be just scratching the surface, as if we were sailing on an ocean with miles and miles underneath us. But this presentation is going off my normal path. There are many reasons why I chose this line from the Lord of the Rings trilogy as the title of my presentation. All that is gold is not glitter, not all those who wander are lost. Mainly because I started reading these books when I was in my later teens, around your age. Everyone identified with Frodo Baggins, an innocent young hobbit about to go off on an adventure to fight evil. The trilogy is also a template for the hero's journey, a category of stories found in literature and film, which describes the process a character goes through while facing challenges, conflicts, and ultimately triumphs over adversity. It's a journey we all must undertake, whether we know it or not. Sometimes more than once in our lives. Frodo answered the call and said yes, even though he wanted to stay in his warm and safe hobbit home. just like his Uncle Bilbo. We can all relate to that, but he answered the call, and because of that, he was never the same again. The trilogy begins with Bilbo Baggins writing his story of answering the call, to go on an adventure with a bunch of ill-mannered dwarves to slay the dragon Smaug. And I kind of see myself like Bilbo, retelling the story of answering the call, of dedicating my life to the pursuit of psychological understanding and knowledge. And it began here at Tungus Community College over 30 years ago when I came to study alcohol and drug counseling. But before I answered that call, I was doing what every teenager was doing. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And I spent the next decade on that. I also became an alcoholic in the process. It was one of the darker decades of my life that I don't need to talk about here, only to tell you the ending was predictably ugly, with the usual emotional and mental pain, including a suicide plan. Before I was able to proceed, I begged God to help me, and I passed out. I woke up the next morning on a cold, early December day. I bundled up my 4-year-old daughter, and I found the nearest Alcoholics Anonymous meeting in downtown Britain. I never had another urge to drink. People told me what I had experienced was called the spiritual awakening. So I set my life on the goal of finding these answers. Besides psychology, I studied history, metaphysics, the occult, Buddhism, meditation, nutrition, energy healing, sociology, philosophy, psychedelic drugs, and even fairy tales. When I started studying addiction, it wasn't so much of how or why people become addicted. That was fairly clear. I wanted to understand how people heal. How do people get better? So let's talk about psychology. What is it? And I'm kind of a purist here. I don't know if you can see in the second definition. Psychology is the study of the human soul, the spirit, and the mind. This is not the same definition of psychology in textbooks. This is the definition from the dictionary. And because I am a purist, this is the definition I use. So let's take a look at mental health and mental illness, the definitions. So, and I will read these in case some of you can't see it. Mental illness, also called mental health disorders, refers to a wide range of mental health conditions, disorders that affect mood, thinking, and behavior. Examples are depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, eating disorders, and addictive behaviors, and this is according to the Mayo Clinic. And yeah, a wide range is pretty much accurate. But I wonder if we looked at mental illness through the lens of the definition of psychology, we might consider the incredible increase in depression and anxiety that we're seeing today is much more than the scientifically limited broken brain theory, and maybe, just maybe, what we're witnessing is something like a soul sickness. Krishnamurti was an early 20th century philosopher, and he wrote, "It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a sick society." All of my students are very familiar with this phrase because I repeat it all the time. What kind of society is Krishnamurti referring to? What's he talking about? I contend that he is talking about a postmodern one. And in postmodern, it is associated with the societal and cultural transitions after World War II, with a rise in mass media and a consumerist pop culture. But before we get to postmodern, I'm going to talk a little bit about the era that came before that, called modernism. And if any of you are lucky enough to still have your grandparents alive, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about here. So modernism is in the late 19th century to the early 20th century, it uses rational and logical thinking to gain knowledge, a sense of unity, a sense of individualism, the idea that the family is central to social order, and absolute truths, universal truths, the building of tradition, and finding meaning and purpose. And here are a couple of comments, and then I'll go over this next slide. Here's a couple of comments that I've taken from research. The shift from modern to postmodern is marked by a change in the structures of society, with effects on employment, marital status, family, relationships, and mental illness. The increase in mental problems, anxiety, stress, depression, addiction, and suicide is related to the uncertainty, instability, and unpredictability resulting from a lack of structure and a shared reality. So let's look at postmodernism, and these are just a couple of blurbs. After World War II, it relies on the use of unscientific, irrational thought process and the rejection of logical thinking, a sense of fragmentation and conflicting identities, alternate family units, marriage, childcare. Truth is relative. The rejection of tradition, and life is pointless, and we start to see the rise of nihilism. Now, I'll give you the definition of nihilism, because that's a word that we rarely hear in our day-to-day conversations. It is the rejection of all religious and moral principle in the belief that life is meaningless. So that is pretty significant. So think about that for a minute, just a minute. And I haven't even mentioned the main Jedi yet, the brain. But I'll get to that in a minute. What do you think it looks like in a world where everyone is free to decide what's right or wrong, good or bad, true or false? I would say chaos. Okay. So I'm going to show you, the next couple of slides I'm going to show you is more of a visual demonstration of the difference between modernism and postmodernism. So please forgive me, all of you art majors, for choosing these. And again, keep in mind that yes, I might have cherry-picked some, but come on. But these were more of the highlights of art pieces that demonstrate modern art and postmodern art. Okay, so here's this pretty self-explanatory. A naked woman having lunch with two men, but we won't get into that right now. Okay, so you get the idea. Van Gogh. Okay, now we're leaving modern art. Jackson Pollock. So as you're watching these, just kind of take a step inside your mind and check out what it makes you feel like. Okay, so this is actually, it's kind of extraordinary because this picture is actually referred to as poop art. And I can't even believe I am saying that word. So, it has been, apparently, it's quite a big thing for the last 10 years. I'm glad I missed it. Because it is quite stunning. And I'm sure by now, as college students, you have experienced something referred to as cognitive dissonance. And hold that thought too, because I'm coming back. I promise. But before I do, let's take a look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs just for a second. Everybody has heard of Maslow's hierarchy in one way or another. which, among other things, describes the process of psychological maturity. So we can see on the bottom, there's the physiological needs. And according to Maslow, as we move up the pyramid, we have to fulfill these tasks first before we can move up. So you'll see, like, the bottom one, physiological needs. If you don't have a place to live or food to eat, you're not going to be really consumed with your self-esteem. You're not going to think about joining a club because you're too worried about eating and finding a place to live. So as we go up, we get to the point of self-actualization, which is moving beyond the ego. So when the social structures that give us a sense of meaning, connection, and stability are dismantled and not replaced with anything of substance, existential depression becomes the norm. Unfortunately, psychology was not immune to the relentless influence of postmodernism. So what are the effects of postmodernism on our psychology? Using the original definition, my definition, of psychology in the context of spirituality. And I apologize if that is small. I will read it in a minute, though. So how did the field of psychology address this? In 1994, spirituality was recognized by the American Psychiatric Association as a spiritual religious issues and was included in the diagnosis of the DSM-4. Funding agencies for drug and alcohol treatment required addressing spiritual issues on every treatment plan. In fact, the entire 12-step recovery movement is based on a connection to something greater than the limitations of ego. All the early theorists, Carl Jung, Wilhelm Reich, William James, Abraham Maslow, Roberto Assagioli, Rollo May, all wrote about the significance of transcendence, moving beyond the limitations of a neurotic ego. And most every psychology textbook stresses the fact that human beings are meaning makers. And what that means is that we are built to make meaning out of our experiences. So let's talk about some of these definitions. Spirituality can exist without religion, but religion cannot exist without spirituality. And the definition of religion, because there is a difference between religion and spirituality. Religion is an organized system of beliefs, practices, rituals, and symbols designed to facilitate closeness to the sacred or transcendent. And spirituality is the personal quest for understanding answers to the ultimate questions about life, about meaning, and about relationship with the sacred or transcendent, which may or may not lead to the development of religious behavior. So let's take a look at what the postmodern culture did with this. This was a 1966 Time cover, and it was voted as one of the best Time covers ever, which I think is a statement of where we might have been in 1966. And for all you historians in the room, this was within 5 years of when JFK, RFK, and MLK were assassinated. So it was a very, very dark time in American history, and I don't think we can recover from that time period. Where spirituality provides us with a sense of meaning and purpose, our culture replaced meaning and purpose with nihilism. We live in a constant state of entertainment and or the pursuit of it. For example, the most popular television show for the last 5 years, anybody want to take a guess? The Walking Dead. And which I think is another statement. And also we have Black Mirror. Anybody ever watch Black Mirror? Kind of creepy. And then, of course, the most recent movie to come out, Joker. Anyone see that movie? Okay. See any themes in our entertainment? You see any themes? All right, so now that I've got you all excited, let's look at research. So there has been a great deal of well-conducted scientific research over these last 25 years. And I'm not going to, I hope you can see it. I'm not going to really go through this one by one. I'm just putting it up there to show you that there is research. If you want, I can read it, but. Okay, so these last 25 years focusing on the role of the spiritual connection with quality of life or dealing with hard times. And the results indicate that the religious spiritual involvement are positively associated with indicators of psychological well-being and less depression and suicide. In fact, even in the early 2000s, medical schools were integrating spirituality into the curriculum of mental health professionals. Obviously, this is no longer the case. And in a very short time, we went from including these topics in schools and clinical practices to a major cultural shift of the decline of religious and spiritual practice in America. It's really weird because it seemed to happen almost overnight. Now it's almost taboo to even talk about your religious or spiritual beliefs. So, I'm not going to go into depth talking about the brain, much to Kelly's chagrin, only to remind you the brain is the final frontier, and it is still a mystery in many ways. Aside from the brain keeping every major body system operating, one of its main functions is to process sensory information. The brain works just like a computer. That's a great analogy that we all know. Taking in tons and tons of data from our environment and organizing it in meaningful ways. Let me say that again. It takes in tons and tons of data from our environment and organizes it in meaningful ways. I like that sentence. So what happens when someone in the grips of a culture that pretty much tells us life sucks? Think about the message in Joker. Anybody who saw that movie want to say what that message was? You could put it in a couple of words.
The world is cruel and out to get you, and you can't succeed if you have any kind of problems or issues, or you're not like the norm.
Right. So it's kind of disheartening. Yeah, so there's the brain. And as college students, you have definitely bumped up against cognitive dissonance many, many times. One of my favorite examples of cognitive dissonance is cigarette smoking. Because I loved smoking cigarettes. But you can't smoke cigarettes and love it, and at the same time realize it's going to kill you, and it's going to kill you bad. It doesn't kill you good, it kills you bad. So smokers are faced with this cognitive dissonance all the time. Loving smoking, hating smoking. Love it, hate it. So when you experience cognitive dissonance, if we were to look at the definition, refers to a situation involving conflicting attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors. This produces a feeling of mental discomfort, leading to an alteration in one of the attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors to reduce the discomfort. So essentially what this is saying is that the brain itself cannot hold two opposing thoughts at the same time. One of them has to go. Who's going to go? Well, in my case, what relieved anxiety was having a cigarette. So that worked out perfectly for me until I had to face it again and deal with the discomfort and then quit, make a decision. So if these internal conflicts are not resolved, we experience stress. And in response, the body's sympathetic nervous system is activated due to the release of hormones designed to protect us from threat or danger. Now we can look at the physiological effects of cognitive dissonance, and you'll see right below that the fight, flight, freeze. Anybody know what that is? You've all experienced fight, flight, freeze. So in fight, flight, freeze, we operate out of the primitive part of our brain, the reptilian brain, the brain of survival. Remember, the brain doesn't know the difference between a perceived threat or a real threat. And so in cognitive dissonance, holding those two opposite thoughts in your mind without any kind of resolution leads to mental confusion. And then mental confusion, if not resolved, leads to internal distress. And if internal distress is not resolved, it leads to the brain shutting down. And doesn't that look like anxiety and depression? And here's another example of cognitive dissonance. In a spiritual world or a spiritual life, life is divine. Human beings are sacred. In the postmodern world, life is meaningless and human beings are parasites. So, this could be a problem, don't you think? And not a theoretical problem, but a real problem, a mental problem. In a postmodern culture, we have lost meaning, we have lost connection to our souls, and we have lost connection to each other. And this void has not been replaced with anything of substance, value, or meaning. If we lived our lives by acknowledging that we were souls, the definition of psychology, we would ask different questions. We would pursue different answers. And we wouldn't allow ourselves to be entertained into oblivion. And yet, the reality is that our connection to something greater is still there. The culture we are submersed in is not reality, but it requires a little bit of a risk. It requires that you answer the call. It requires that you rise to the occasion. We are all heroes in our own story. You are all the hero of your own story. No one else. And that's it. So I guess you have time for questions.
There is plenty of time for questions
Good.
or comments.
Okay.
Both. So this is the time when the audience gets a chance to chime in. Any thoughts?
I'll go. So, as the other psych professor here, I've told my students who are here that I have a different perspective than Harriet, but I agree with everything she said, just for the record. So, I think
She
hit
has
the
to
nail
say
on the
that,
head.
by the way.
I did not have to say
Disclaimer.
that. But really, you hit the nail on the head.
So when you say you have a different perspective, you mean as far as the discipline of psychology,
Yeah.
but not that specific.
Yeah, I kind of diss Freud a little bit more. I'm really into the brain, the
Yeah.
more biological aspect, but in terms of the deeper issues that are harder to study scientifically, which I tend to oppose a little bit more, I think you you accurately portrayed it.
Thank you.
And I agree.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So in light of this discussion, in treating depression and anxiety, do you have any suggestions or thoughts about approaches of how those should be treated, or counseling around those things, around those, because it's prevalent, I mean everyone's,
Holy moly, yes.
right, so I have a strict medical background,
Mhm.
so, you know, I was trained in okay, go through a list of symptoms and then we give you drug X, you know, medically speaking. But from my point of view, it doesn't seem to be working in any way, shape, or form.
That's true.
And I have not been to counseling for any, you know, psychiatric issues of any sort. So I don't really know what's done, what the approach is. But do you think that the approach should be changed, or what would you suggest?
Well, I think the approach has been changed. And as I was saying, when I was in the field, the issue of spirituality was pretty in the forefront of working with clients, of addressing what are your spiritual beliefs. So that has long been gone, and it's not a topic that is discussed anymore for some really weird reason. I don't know why. And so your question is a wonderful question about, well, what do you do? And that is, I think it comes back to education in some way, of looking at depression and anxiety as the result of a very sick society. And I would contend that that is exactly why we have an explosion, especially younger people, an explosion of depression and anxiety. That's not normal, and that's not natural. And you can't say that everybody all of a sudden developed a brain abnormality.
Why'd you look at me?
I don't know.
I can't imagine why she
Why did I look at you?
coming directly at you.
So I think it's, counseling has changed. The whole psychotherapy has changed. Insurance companies run the show. So I think, at least initially, to give a suggestion, go outside. Disconnect from your computer and your phone. That's the two things that I would suggest right there. Just try that. 5 minutes a day. Put your phone in another room. Forget where you put it. Go outside. Look outside. Look at nature. Watch a sunset. And try to find something beyond yourself that has meaning. So that's what I meant by when our culture starts to strip these things from us. What do we have left? What do we have left? Our phones. Or the next movie on TV, or the next product to buy, or the next, as we get further and further and further away from us and our connections to other people, which is serious and dangerous as a society. Phil, you always ask really hard questions. I don't know if I want to call on you.
Well,
Now that I
so
totally
that
embarrassed
you
you.
believe that people need to have meaning. One concern that I have with the future is that technology is rapidly growing, and with things like artificial intelligence, there's a likelihood that a lot of people will not have a job.
Or a brain.
And people are talking about just giving people a universal basic income.
Mhm.
And if that's the case, I mean, most people find meaning in their job or in their career. And if people don't have that, then, I mean, I assume that you think that the rates of depression and suicide increase. And is there any way to combat that? And how do you feel about, well, let's leave it at that.
You were going to ask me how I feel about artificial intelligence. Yeah, we had this conversation
Maybe.
in the courtroom. And I said what I thought about it. But I don't know. I don't know. You can't get in the way of technology. You can't say it's all bad. Because nothing is either all bad or all good. That's ridiculous. Nothing is either all bad or all good. But that doesn't mean that good things aren't used for bad. And that's something that I think most human beings are very trusting. And we believe that the people who are in control have some kind of regard for our well-being and not to do anything that would hurt us. But that's not necessarily true anymore. So I didn't answer your question.
Well,
I know I didn't.
you kind of went in the direction that I was also curious about. The woman in the front, she was talking about medicine and drugs. And being that we live in America, in a capitalist society, and obviously the pharmaceutical industry is massive in our country and one of the best in the world. Do you think that people are being pushed to drugs too easily and not given these like natural cures as like going outside, watching a sunset, exercising? And then we also have this false reality that Hollywood gives us that says like life is going to be a fairy tale, you're going to live in a big house with a white picket fence, and really life is hard and people aren't prepared for it.
Right.
I
I think you answered your question. That was really good. But just to comment on that, there was a very well-known psychoanalyst who lived up in the north part of Connecticut, and his name was M. Scott Peck. Anybody ever hear of him? He's dead now, but he was a famous guy. He wrote the book, The Road Less Traveled, not to be confused with the poem by Robert Frost. But the first line of that book, and I've gotten 2 copies of that book in my lifetime because it just it wore out. And the first sentence in that book is, "Life is difficult." Life is difficult. And yet, you're right, somewhere along the line, the influences that no, it's really a fairy tale. And that's not true. So that's a really good question.
Yeah, I too indict postmodernism. I feel like the intentions of it were good, that all points of view ought to be respected and ought to be admired, but the end result of postmodernism is that all points of view are equally valid, regardless of the facts. And a wise graduate instructor of mine said we could never attain absolute truth in anything, but we've got to try. And I think we've stopped trying, and all we have now are points of view. And the drivers of postmodernism, Hollywood, Facebook, and other social media sites, they just perpetuate this idea that all points of view are equally valid, that there's no such thing as truth, there's not fake news, and we don't even know what fake news is. All sides perpetrated, by the way. But the drivers of it are just kind of forcing it upon us. And I think the ultimate impact of postmodernism happens to the people who can least afford to be impacted by it. Hollywood is not going to suffer. They have enough money and enough wealth to insulate themselves from it. But people who live in middle America are typically the ones who are affected by it. To the point where there is an opioid crisis, to the point where we can't make heads or tails of an impeachment trial because everyone has a point of view that's equally valid. So we don't even know where to go with any of this. And that's why I think postmodernism has become a very dangerous thing.
Yes, I agree. I think the culture of postmodernism has had a tremendous effect. And Krishnamurti's quote is even more relevant. I think he wrote that. Well, he died in 1980. So, and we weren't anywhere near the mess that we're in today. And so I think he was right that it is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. So what does that mean? Well, it means if you're not well adjusted, such as if you're depressed or you're anxious, obviously you're not well adjusted. And that's a good thing, isn't it? Not to be well adjusted or acclimated or get used to or like or agree with a sick society. So people who don't fit in start to feel like they're misfits. Anybody ever feel like a misfit, that you don't belong to society? That's a good thing too. That might just be a very good thing. That might just be what saves your soul, to not believe that you fit into this world. Because the world as it is kind of bleak. But that doesn't mean that we have to agree with that we have to go along with it, as long as we know what it is that we're facing. So if we know that there's a tremendous influence that's coming at us from all sides, especially Hollywood, who has their own agenda, and then the media, who has their own agenda, and we're in the middle. And believe me, they want our attention. They work very hard for our attention, and we're being pulled in a million different directions.
You're familiar with Erich Fromm?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, I just finished reading Escape from Freedom. I don't want to get through the whole book, but this was written about 80 years ago. And his argument is that people will find meaning. They have to find meaning in life. They have to find something to believe in. And so as the old structures decay, they will find meaning. But they find meaning in really destructive ways. Particularly destruction turned against other people. Partly that book was a critique of fascism, because he was writing right at the beginning of World War II. He was writing about Nazism, but it really is applicable to what's going on now in so many ways. People find meaning in the damnedest things. Not to pontificate. Climate change. There are people who see this as a religious endeavor because they find meaning in believing it. And say, we have to change the whole country, we have to change behaviors, we have to change consumer mentalities, because if we don't, we'll destroy the planet. Just as one example. They believe in it because they have to believe in something.
Right. We have to believe in something. That's definitely a human trait.
So, would you say that as a society we pushed a lot of stuff into our shadows, and now everything's coming forward all at once, and that we're basically having a societal shadow vomit?
Whoa! Nico, I'm impressed. You remember that lecture of Carl Jung in The Shadow?
That was the one that talked about it mostly.
Yeah, okay, well, Nico was asking about, is this our shadow that is kind of coming out and vomiting all over the place?
That's
So,
what it feels like.
it does,
Especially
yeah.
if you're on the outside watching it all happen.
Yes. So let me just tell you, for those of you who aren't psychology students, what the shadow is. It refers to a theory in Carl Jung psychology, where there are aspects of our personality that we don't like. Okay, so just think of all the aspects of your personality that you don't like. How many of them are there, right? So some of us could fill books of, well, I don't like this, and I don't like that, and today I don't like my hair, and yesterday I didn't like my weight, and I don't like my clothes, and I don't like my car, and, or aspects of our personality, aspects of our nature. So most of us don't like to be conscious of our less attractive features, like being mean, or being selfish, or being revengeful. You ever feel that way? You ever feel like, I'm just going to get revenge, and I'm going to show them, right? Or I'm going to show her, whatever it is. Well, these kinds of feelings or thoughts are kind of make us feel uncomfortable inside ourselves, like, oh, I don't really see myself as a mean person. I'm not mean. I'm not mean. So what I do with that is I push it down. I push it down and repress it into my subconscious. I'm not mean. I'm the nicest person you'll ever meet. Meanwhile, I've got a mean thing brewing right underneath the surface that, unfortunately, I'm not aware of. But my shadow is. That becomes my shadow. So anything that I don't want to acknowledge in the sunlight becomes my shadow. And it becomes a very dark aspect of my personality that will come out. I mean, ask my daughter. She's seen my shadow all the time. Right? Yeah, because guess what? We all have one. And these are the lesser, like I said, the lesser attractive aspects of our nature. So if we are all collectively repressing our shadow, absolutely, you're going to see a lot of negativity. Like, try driving on the highway. I'm serious. Drive on the highway and see what happens. You take your life in your hands practically now to get into an automobile. So, yeah, everybody can't be on steroids driving on the highways. No, they're all filled with rage. Someone cuts them off and their head explodes, literally. Somebody cuts them off. You know, where did this temper come from? I think Nico is right. It's a part of our collective shadow that we don't want to acknowledge, so it comes out. And it comes out either in a self-destructive way or an outside destructive way. We either self-destruct or we destruct out there. Take your pick. Choose your poison. Because if we're filled with this destruction, this energy, then we're going to start to destroy ourselves. And then each other. Nice question.
Do you think that's from a society that wants you to suppress all of your bad emotions and just be happy all the time and not deal with your actual
Oh, sure.
emotions? Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, and it's kind of, I mean, it doesn't make any sense when you think about it, because we get a message from our culture that tells us life is really bad. Okay, the appropriate response to that would be, wow, I feel kind of bummed out. But no, they want us to feel excited about it and happy about it. And if you're not happy, something's wrong with you. Something's wrong with you. You better find out what it is. And I bet you've got a brain imbalance. I'm being flip.
She's gonna get me on
Yes,
that.
no,
Okay.
okay.
Transference. It's all good. I'll take it.
Yeah.
Pardon?
Do you have any suggestions on how to deal with cognitive dissonance?
Well, I think in the most important thing is to be aware of it, to be conscious of it. And that is something that all of this stuff is easier to approach and deal with if we allow ourselves to be aware of it, that it's happening in the first place. First, we have to admit that it's happening and then start to recognize it and start to look for it and see it. So in yourself, if you're having some cognitive dissonance, you would recognize what are the two opposing thoughts that I'm carrying in my mind.
And if you wanted to convince someone to recognize that in
Their
themselves?
own? Good luck!
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, when you want to convince somebody else that they're in a period of cognitive dissonance, no, they'll tell you to leave. Right? And you don't really want to do that with people that you love. But I think it's happening all over the country for the last 3 years now, hasn't it? Yes.
I've tried that with my roommate. Like, they're very depressed and anxious, and then I suggested try medication because it worked for me. And I was born and raised Lutheran, so I've gone between yoga and meditation, going to church, not going to church, being on medication, not being on medication, and I'm diagnosed bipolar 1. So run the gamut of experiencing where to find meaning and where to find solutions, and really it's just everyone's journey is different. So I was like, well, maybe if you believe there was a higher power, he's like, I don't want to talk about that. And I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe you wouldn't be so depressed all the time because he tries to find meaning in all these different things, and it just hurts me to see my roommates, one drinks all the time and one just plays video games all the time, and it hurts me to see them so, as you said, cognitive dissonant from themselves, hating themselves but not looking for solutions. And I agree with everything you said because a couple weeks ago I was in Wisconsin at a diner and I read in the Fond du Lac Reporter everything you had said about opioid crisis is up, unemployment, or people not basically finding meaning in work or life, and suicides have increased 50%, and there's something with 293% probably the opioid usage over the past few decades. So it really is enmeshed. You can't take one out without the others. We spend the most, $7,000 per person in the United States, as we learned from our recent civic engagement talk about the the physical health aspect. We spend that much per person, and yet we have the worst healthcare rate, I guess. Like, we spend that much on per person, but then, like, how is nobody better? Like, how is nobody okay? And then you said about the pharmaceuticals, there's no money in spirituality that isn't based in, like religion. Like, you won't have insurance companies saying, yeah, go ahead and have them go to therapy or something like that. That doesn't make them enough money. They get their money off of the pharmaceuticals because there's money in that. So that's where your insurance premiums and your healthcare coverage comes in, which leads into your previous statement about where do we find solutions. Well, we find solutions in what we're offered, and what we're offered is a limited palette.
Right, and it's a postmodern
It all comes
palette.
back to
Yes, it does come back to
Right.
postmodernism, which is why I said that psychology was not immune to that. The field of psychology has been severely affected by postmodernism, just based on your comment. What do you do? Well, psychology is the field that is supposed to give us the answers. You turn to psychologists to ask those questions. What do I do now? What can you explain what's happening in our culture? We go to those people. And when they have been influenced by postmodernism, they don't have the answers anymore either. So the answers come from digging. It comes from looking. It comes from doing your own research and and trying not to be so influenced by the culture. And that's very, very, very difficult. It's very difficult. So I think by just talking about it, by putting it out there, that maybe this isn't you, that maybe this is something beyond you, and then start there. But one of the things that we used to, and just this kind of carries on to what Fran was talking about. When you were talking, I was thinking about what was his name? He wrote Man's Search for Meaning.
Viktor Frankl.
Anybody know? Viktor Frankl. Thank you very much. Viktor Frankl was a psychoanalyst, and he was in Auschwitz. And in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, he wrote about his experience in the concentration camps. And his experience was that he saw that his fellow human beings who were dying because they lost meaning in their life. And he realized that he was not going to give the Nazis the ability to take away his ability to choose. That he could choose what he did with his own self. He could choose his beliefs. He could choose what he was going to do. If he was going to find meaning in this horrible experience. There is meaning in horrible experiences. There's meaning in depression. Depression and anxiety are messengers. So if we look at this body, mind, spirit, this is the total human experience, body, mind, spirit. Everything comes in threes if you like numbers. It's all part of it. And one thing that we've seen in postmodernism is that they've taken it away. There's disconnections now. Everything is disconnected. There's no more body-mind connection either. So when you talk about, oh, you keep getting migraines, well, maybe it's stress. Oh no, I've got a brain tumor. Well, no, maybe it's because, you're not eating well, or maybe it's because you're too consumed with yourself. Go out and volunteer someplace. Go help somebody. Open the door for somebody. Throw something at somebody. I don't know.
I think he called it logotherapy, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Thank you. I'm so glad there's people in here who know what I'm talking about too.
I hope that you're familiar with Johann Hari's Lost Connection.
Yes.
So I let Professor Mann borrow the copy because I think it's something she really needs to read, because a lot of it is reviews and a lot of it is reviews. But I also have a personal question for you.
Okay.
What made you switch from drug and alcohol counseling to psychology?
Oh, that's more of a political question. Well, I started to see the field of alcohol and drug counseling change. And the reason why I came here to teach in the first place was I was very disheartened by what was happening in the drug and alcohol field. And I worked in a variety of settings, all different kinds of settings. And I just wasn't I didn't think that the ideas that were coming down the pike were addressing the severity of addiction. It wasn't looking at addiction, and it wasn't looking at how people get better. And just a little example of that, when I came into the field, treatment lasted for a whole year. And I'm not talking about inpatient, I'm talking about outpatient. So it was a step down. It was intensive therapy, and then it was, step down to once a week, and then it was, step down again. And their family, it was mandatory that the family come to therapy with them. So that's quite different. And there were also spiritual groups. There were, if we wanted to have a priest or a pastor or a rabbi or a shaman, people came in and they would talk. So there was a lot of openness to that people recover in a lot of different ways. And then the insurance companies and the funding agencies decided that they had to put their own 2 cents in, and they started dictating treatment to us. So the insurance companies, people who had no clue at all about alcohol and drug treatment, started telling us how to give treatment. And I was like, I don't think so. And so then it just came about that the position for an adjunct faculty here opened up, and I came and I stayed again. And I saw it as my ability to teach students a better way of approaching addiction and how people heal from addiction. How people get addicted in the first place, too, is very important. Because there's just as many reasons why people become addicted as there are ways that they heal. So you can't treat people like they are cookie cutters. It doesn't work that way. And that's part of modernism, that people are individuals. Everybody is different. We're all the same, but we are different in that sameness. But now in postmodern, you see everybody as a group. It's a group. And if you're not in that group, you're screwed. And that's dangerous, like we've been saying. That's really dangerous.
What if someone is trying to find meaning in their life? What do you think would be? What do you think would be something that's meaningful? Like, because I mean, a lot of people think like job, promotion, material things are what people strive for in life.
Sure, because we've been told that that's what makes us a really good person, is if we have stuff.
So do you think that, like, maybe not necessarily religion, but like you said, like spirituality and family?
Well, it's like I said towards the end of the talk, if we recognize that we were souls, there's a saying, we're spiritual beings having a physical experience. And if we recognize that we were souls, we would ask different questions. So I don't know, I think, and I don't know if this is just because I'm an old woman now, but the most important things in my life are my children and my grandchildren. And and they would probably say that was totally not the case when they were growing up, because I was busy with my job and everything like that. But yeah, I think connections that we make with other human beings is absolutely the most important thing. That's what I would say.
Well, I just noticed, by the way, you even asked the question, you hesitate to say religion. But why not religion? What's wrong with that? I think we are conditioned in our society to think, well, any religious talk is taboo. And any belief, and I'm not indicting you for what you said, I'm just saying that's kind of a reflection of where we are in our society in terms of the way we look at religion. And it's because we've had about a generation of people getting educated that religion is bad, that it corrupts people, that it's biased against women, it's biased against certain people of color, it's biased against the LGBT community. But the fact is, if you know history, religion has been much more a source of good than it is of bad, and that never gets publicized. It has been responsible, the single most important thing responsible for the end of slavery in Western civilization, for instance. Without religion, there would have been no Martin Luther King Jr. in the civil rights movement. And I could go down the line in endless ways about how religion has been a source of good, but you don't get those messages.
Right.
You really do. You get a lot of the opposite
Exactly.
of how bad religion is nowadays. But I hesitated to say it because I think someone going in search to find meaning in religion, it might be hard for them to find it in religion if they don't pick the right one, if they don't pick one that jives with them.
Absolutely. You're right.
Yeah, I would just say like finding a personal relationship with God if you're comfortable with that. But it's true. Like there's so many. Organized religion is its own kind of God. Like everybody's like, is this right or is this wrong? Because I've struggled with this myself, being raised strictly Wells, Wisconsin Evangelical Lutheran Synod, and not being Wells. Like, oh, I'm wrong. Well, why can't I just be Christian, or why can't I just believe there's a God? Like, why can't I have a personal relationship with God that I talk to and I believe in? And people on that extreme don't want to accept people on the other extreme who are like, well, I just rather believe in spirituality, or there's a higher calling, or a higher purpose, or a higher power. And that's where our country's coming to, is the collision of extremes without the mediation of one voice, or of logic, or of civil discourse. If you can't have civil discourse, you can't have this conversation, and then nobody gets to individually express themselves. Nobody gets to talk about what they believe, what they don't believe, because everybody's all up in arms about taking it personally, but it's not personal.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you can dislike an idea. Like, I just saw the movie Dirty John, and it's about domestic violence, and this son-in-law shot his wife, and she's like, I hate what you've done, but I still love you. So you can hate what people do, but you shouldn't hate them because you really just hate yourself. Just like sadness and anger, sadness precedes anger.
Right.
I think when we get to a point where we're asking questions on national magazine covers that say, is God dead? And we're making these separations between the spirit, mind, and body. Well, then you look and you say, what do you have left? All you have left is your own intelligence and your own thoughts as a human race, right? And so the things that we are most easily able to explain are scientific. So we can measure this, we can measure that. I can say you have diabetes because your blood sugar is this or whatever else, right? But we can't so easily explain the spirit and the mind. And so we push those things out because we don't have a way to say, I don't know why you're depressed. You know, and acknowledge that as it being the answers that we don't know. Or I can't fix you with this or that. And that's not an okay answer. And so we don't sit well with that. And so we find ways to push that out and make that not be our reality.
Right. Exactly. Alana's.
So I think that, like growing up in this society, being like as young as I am, I think the further away we stray from our beliefs and from our religions and the things that were brought from generations to generations, we're gonna keep getting sicker. We're gonna keep getting worse. We're never gonna get better if we don't embrace these things, and if we stop demonizing these things and looking at things such as religious beliefs or like spirituality as something that's like a cult or something that's gonna like cause conflict. If we like stop doing that, we're gonna be at such a great place, and it's such an accepting place, regardless of like what different opinions we might have, because it's just like something so important to have, and once you take it away, you're left with nothing. You're left with your problems at night in bed, alone in the dark,
with your phone.
Exactly.
Making it worse.
It's never too far away.
Yeah. Security blanket.
So, okay, I just wanted to backtrack to like the connections thing. So, with the rise of social media to fill the void of distraction that everyone's trying to get through, could you speculate that the more you try to connect that way, the more lonely you feel?
Of course. Absolutely. absolutely, the more you try to connect with something that is unconnectable, the more disconnected you're going to feel. I mean, I asked my psychology class a couple of weeks ago, how many of you know at least 2 people's names? And how many, I don't know, like maybe 3? How many students raised their hand, do you remember?
Literally like 4 of us.
Yeah, out of 30?
And I think the
And
4 of us know
and
each
you
other's
guys have been
names.
together. What?
I said I think the 4 people who raised their hands are the people who know each other's names.
Right. So that's like unheard of. That's unheard of. And why is that so? And I think I talk to my colleagues about it all the time, that I think this is something that we have to address as educators, and that needs to be the focus of our education, not so much what's coming out of a textbook, but how to make students feel more connected. Right, connected.
I think we call it the course Humanity 101. We really lost our humanity.
Right. We have lost our humanity, but there's a
Traditional
solution.
societies haven't lost their humanity in Western. They still know what it is to be human. It's the postmodern society.
Yes.
We don't know what it is to be human anymore.
So when you start to feel that this is all you, that you're the one who's crazy, you're the one who's depressed, you're the one, I mean, people even personalize their depression and anxiety. My depression, my anxiety. Don't take it away from me, it's mine. I mean, really think about how that language works out. My depression, I own it, it's mine. And it's gonna stay there, right? But, and maybe it's just a reaction. That it's just something that all of us are feeling, and we can't really articulate it or connect to each other, which would alleviate it. If we connect with people, it will alleviate it. Now, Sandra?
So, just based on going what he said, like my boyfriend and I recently just got rid of our social media, and it really does help because I feel like the idea of social media is like nice on the surface, like oh you just get to see what people are up to, but like I found myself going on Snapchat like 24/7 checking up to see like there was another story I can watch, and it's just so stupid and pointless. And really it doesn't do anything for your life. Like you're just relying on like other people's lives to keep you entertained when really you should just be focused on yourself.
Which leads to feelings of emptiness. Did you have to talk? Oh.
You don't have to answer this if you don't want to. But
That's a good way to start.
do you believe that organized religion has been used to control the masses in the past?
Well, of course. Religion isn't immune to postmodernism either. It's like a plague. Postmodernism is like a plague.
So if that's the case, though, right? If it's been used to control masses and whatnot, then why is it so bad that everybody's straying away from it?
Because religion and spirituality are different. Religion is the organized practice. Spirituality is the personal connection.
Okay.
So what we have done as a culture is throw the baby out with the bathwater. I love that phrase.
But I would say that that's true in terms of organized religion as well. There's an element of it in some religions that want to control the masses, but there's also an element in organized religion that's very positive and good.
Absolutely.
It's one thing to be spiritual, but I think in the end that still may leave you with a sense of emptiness unless there's a community around you that you can connect with that institutionalizes religion. And that part of religion is very good, and we shouldn't forget that. Whatever.
We shouldn't keep interjecting.
I know, I'm sorry.
We're historians.
We never get to talk to each other either.
Yeah.
We're like, oh, hey.
I'm a historian or a psychologist.
Professors have a
Briefly
tea.
back to Fromm. Fromm makes the case that he goes back to medieval Europe, and with the rise of modern society, he really sees that as the beginning of this change in human behavior. There was commonality. There was a common culture there, and the common culture revolved around Christianity, really the one church in Western Europe, and that was true for centuries. The vast majority of people had that commonality. Whether it was good or it was bad, it was a stabilizing force. It was something familiar. It was generation after generation. It never changed. It was a sense of comfort. It was a sense that people knew it was there. That's gone.
Okay, I think we're just about
Yep.
out of time. So I want to thank Harriet for a wonderful presentation.
Well, thank you guys.
I just want to say,
Thank you guys. You're
My-
great, wonderful. Thank you.
thank you. My measure of a good presentation is when we're able to bring in many disciplines. And you see how many things we've talked about: from history, religion, philosophy, psychology, to cool art. Which I'm pretty sure my 12-year-old invented. And she also gave us some very meaningful things to think about, and was very powerful. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, you guys.